No matter what God asks of you, give it your all.
May the Lord give you peace, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Daily Bible Wisdom. Today, 11th of August, we celebrate the Feast of St Clare of Assisi, a special day for us Franciscans to rejoice, also for the entire church. St. Francis of Assisi and Clare of Assisi were two important figures in the beginning of the 13th century who actually set the tone for the century, we could say. I would like to share with you today, perhaps in little detail, about this great personality of St. Clare of Assisi. I would like to reflect about her life in three perspectives. The first one is the desire to live a gospel way of life, or what we call as gospel perfection. Inspired naturally by the poor, humble of Assisi, St. Francis, St. Clare left her richness, came after St. Francis, surrendered herself to the Lord, and started a new life. Coming from a very elite, very rich family was not easy. And to give up all the comforts and to live in a totally uncomfortable place was truly a big call or a big decision from Clare of Assisi. But all this in imitation of the gospel. As St. Francis would say, the life of the friars minor is to live the gospel. And so the same inspiration was given to the women as well, that they should follow the perfection of the gospel. That these women who have left their homes, and many of them were rich and comfortable at home, were now to be after the gospel. That was their mandate, as St. Francis would give them. And this is the life of the gospel for them. And Clare and the women were admonished that you continuously seek the gospel perfection, not any other perfection, the gospel perfection. As St. Clare later would say, we become what we love, and what we love shapes who we are, what we think, what we do. And so Francis had inspired this important thought process in the life of Clare of Assisi, namely to imitate the gospel. And St. Clare of Assisi, we can say, was one of the foremost women of the time who would follow the gospel to every dot, every iota possible. The second aspect of the life of St. Clare of Assisi that I would like to reflect is love for the poor Christ, which was something very, very unique to the Franciscan tradition, started by Francis of Assisi, of course. Let's say the figure of Francis of Assisi was always around. It was inspiration from him that this lady, young as she was, rich, comfortable at home, was attracted by the poverty of a man who is going around happy, joyful. Excuse me, what is there in poverty to be happy? But she found happiness. And she decided to be a poor person. And she was wondering, from where does this come? And St. Francis rightly inspired her to follow the poor of Bethlehem, the poverty and the humility of Jesus the Master. In fact, this is the important tradition of the Franciscan way of life. For both Francis and Clare, it was inevitable. If you want to be a friar or a poor Clare, you needed to love the poverty of Jesus. You needed to be poor. You needed to be humble. This is the lifestyle. This is a choice that we make. There was some time in the church a talk about option for the poor. It was changed into preferential option for the poor. But Francis and Clare are not talking about option for the poor. They're talking about a choice to be poor, choice to have nothing. Sine proprio was something in imitation of Jesus, the poor and humble in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem. And Clare followed this pace very well. In fact, it is said of Clare that she gave every bit of comfort, even the little possibility of comforting her, she would sacrifice. All for the Lord, in imitation of Jesus, who was poor, who was humble. And therefore, St. Clare herself would tell, when you love God and when you serve Him, that's all that is needed in our life. If you can love God and serve God, that's all. And then she says, if you love, sacrifice is must. A love without sacrifice is no love at all. And therefore, in her love for Jesus, the poor and the humble, she would not stop in giving up, in sacrificing, in letting go, being sine proprio without anything, and yet content, happy, satisfied. Poverty taught Clare to be much happier than ever before. And through the inspiration of Francis, who was known as the poverello of Assisi, the poor man of Assisi, the little poor man of Assisi, this woman imitated the poverty of Jesus, thoroughly inspired by the little man of Assisi. Something that is very strange of the world even today we can think of. Nobody wants to be poor. Everybody wants to grow up in our lifestyle, in our standing, in our financial matters. Nobody wants to give up everything and be poor. It is not a choice. And today, pandemic has taught us that there are millions and millions who have been pushed towards poverty without their choice. Millions of migrants, we can say, refugees of all kinds from all nations are pushed to this reality of poverty today. There is a new kind of poverty that has been introduced by this pandemic, where people who are just beginning to think and be comfortable and settled have lost everything today. Poverty is not a choice for us today. Nobody wants to choose. Yet we find these two wonderful people, Francis and Clare of the 12th, 13th century, choosing to be poor. By making this choice, they're truly making a big decision in their life. A way out of the normal life of the church and the society those days. So this is a unique quality of Clare of Assisi that we celebrate today. A woman who chose to be poor without anything. And the third aspect of the life of St. Clare is what she is known as. She is known by the name Chiara, Luce, known as light, but she is also known as the mirror. I think these are quite wonderful symbols of our life as well. Light and the mirror. St. Clare is the true light of the church. St. Clare enlightened the church with her contemplation, with her devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, a devotion that unbelievably true of her, that through the help of the Blessed Sacrament, she could even fight without any violence against the enemies who had come to destroy the city. A woman who was deeply in touch with this reality of God's presence in her life. A woman who felt that she is the imitator. She had to imitate the one who said, I am the light of the world. And I think the name suited her very well. That she actually enlightened the people around her. That people sought her for her spiritual wisdom, all that was contemplated within the walls. As light as she was, she is also the mirror that reflects the image of God, image of Christ in her. She would write to her sister Agnes, asking her to look at Jesus as the mirror. Jesus as the mirror in which you look at yourself, who you are, how you are, and then begin to contemplate the reality of Jesus himself. So this way of looking at Clare of Assisi truly inspires us in this age today, when we are all caught up, when we are all blocked, when there is a lot of limitation put around us. Looking at Clare of Assisi, perhaps from these perspectives, will open up few perspectives within us as well. First of all, we recognize in Clare of Assisi that she wanted to follow the perfection of the gospel, nothing but gospel. To love God, that's all. To follow God, that's all. Secondly, a woman who made a concrete choice in her life to be a poor woman, which is unusual. And thirdly, to be the light and to be the mirror that actually reflects Christ himself. Our life as one that is a mirror, that when people see us, they look at themselves. St. Clare, as we remember her today, we thank God for her. As the letter to the Philippians would say, all I want to know is Jesus. All I want to know is Jesus. That is Clare for us. She was so clear about her life purpose. All I want to know is Jesus and Him alone. May you have a wonderful feast of St.